The crack of flesh against flesh echoed through the diner like a thunderclap. Blood trickled down the old man's weathered cheek as he steadied himself against the table. The construction worker loomed over him, chest heaving with rage, while phones emerged from every pocket, recording everything. What the bully didn't know was that the quiet, 72-year-old veteran he'd just assaulted had a daughter who ran the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Within hours, that single moment of violence would unravel a conspiracy reaching into the highest levels of government, expose systematic corruption in a small American town, and prove that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is underestimate someone because they look powerless. Robert Mitchell had moved to Riverside 3 years earlier, seeking nothing more than peaceful anonymity after decades of classified military operations. The small town of 3,800 souls represented everything he'd fought to protect during his 27 years in naval intelligence. Main Street still had the same hardware store that had served 3 generations. Grace's Diner served coffee in thick ceramic mugs. The American flag hung proudly outside the post office, and people still nodded to strangers on the sidewalk. Every Tuesday morning at precisely 7:30, Robert entered Grace's Diner, ordered black coffee and wheat toast, and counted exact change from a leather wallet that had accompanied him to 4 continents. He always sat with his back to the wall, facing the entrance. Old habits from intelligence work never truly faded. Most patrons saw only an elderly man with careful manners and an American Legion pin on his cardigan. They didn't see the 16 medals locked in a case at his home or understand the weight of memories attached to each one. Elena Rodriguez, the young waitress, had memorized his order months ago. She poured his coffee without asking, always black, never touching the cream pitcher. Robert appreciated her efficiency and kindness. In return, he tipped exactly 20% and never complained, even when the toast arrived slightly burned. What Elena noticed but never mentioned was how Robert's eyes constantly scanned the room, how he positioned his phone within easy reach, how he carried himself with a discipline that suggested military background. She'd served enough veterans to recognize the signs. Across the diner, Derek Walsh sat in his usual corner booth, scrolling through social media with increasing agitation. The 34-year-old construction worker had watched Riverside change over the past 5 years, and each change felt like a personal attack. His grandfather had built half the commercial buildings downtown. His father had worked at the textile mill for 30 years before it closed. Operations moved overseas. Derek had expected to inherit a certain status in town, a respect that came with deep roots. Instead, he watched newcomers like Robert Mitchell arrive with their quiet confidence and careful manners, buying properties that long-time families had been forced to sell. To Derek, these outsiders represented everything wrong with modern America. They didn't understand Riverside's history, didn't respect its traditions, didn't know their place. For weeks, Derek had made increasingly pointed comments when Robert entered the diner. Loud observations about people who didn't belong, jokes that weren't actually funny. Each time, other patrons shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. Confrontation wasn't the Riverside way, at least not in public. What nobody knew was that Derek's resentment wasn't entirely self-generated. He'd been attending meetings at a warehouse on the edge of town, gatherings organized by Mayor Brennan and a Philadelphia developer named Victor Kane. The message was always the same: protect Riverside's character by making certain people feel unwelcome. Make them want to leave, sell their properties at desperate prices, clear the way for the riverfront development that would restore the town's prosperity. Robert's property was discussed specifically at these meetings. The hilltop overlooking the river was essential to the development plan. Without it, the boutique hotel complex couldn't proceed as designed. Mayor Brennan had tried offering above market value, but Robert had politely declined. He wasn't interested in selling his home. That Tuesday morning, Derek's patience finally snapped. He'd spent the previous evening at another warehouse meeting, listening to Kane emphasize the urgency of acquiring key properties before the development window closed. The pressure was building, and Robert's calm contentment felt like mockery. Derek stood, work boots loud on the linoleum floor. He crossed the diner with deliberate steps, drawing every eye in the place. Outside, college student Jake Morrison adjusted his camera equipment, filming what he thought would be authentic small-town atmosphere for his journalism project. His lens captured everything through the window. Robert looked up as the shadow fell across his table. Derek loomed over him, expensive watch glinting on his wrist, incongruous with his worker's clothes. "You seem real comfortable here," Derek said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Good morning," Robert replied politely. "This isn't your kind of place." Makes decent people uncomfortable. The diner went silent. Forks stopped moving. Elena's hand moved toward her phone. Fire Chief Rodriguez, eating breakfast near the window, tensed. Robert had faced far worse than playground bullies during his military career, but this was about dignity, about the right to exist peacefully in a country he'd spent his life defending. "I'm just having coffee," Robert said quietly. "I'm not bothering anyone." "That's where you're wrong." Derek leaned closer. "Your being here bothers me. What happened next would be replayed millions of times across America." Derek shoved Robert hard. The elderly veteran stumbled backward, hip catching the table edge. Coffee cups crashed to the floor. Then Derek's open hand cracked across Robert's face with brutal force. The slap echoed through Grace's diner like a whip crack. Blood trickled from where Derek's ring cut the skin. Complete silence, then chaos. Elena raised her phone, recording everything. Jake's camera outside captured perfect angles through the window. The diner's security system documented it all in high definition. Robert's hand went to his burning cheek. For a moment, he looked exactly like what he appeared to be, a helpless old man being brutalized. But then something shifted in his posture. His shoulders straightened. 72 years of dignity and military training kicked in. "You've made a serious mistake," Robert said quietly. Derek laughed. "Yeah? What are you going to do about it, old man?" Robert reached for his phone. He scrolled to his contacts, to the first name on the list. "Jennifer, Director." The phone rang twice. A woman's voice answered, carrying immediate concern and unmistakable authority. "Dad, is everything okay?" Every ear in Grace's diner strained to listen. Every phone captured the moment. "Jennifer," Robert said calmly, "I'm fine, but there's been an incident at Grace's diner in Riverside." The blood drained from Derek Walsh's face as comprehension dawned. "Dad, what happened? Who hurt you? I can have agents there in 20 minutes." Derek, who'd been so confident moments ago, suddenly looked like a man watching his life collapse. Fire Chief Rodriguez stood up slowly. "Derek," Rodriguez said quietly, "do you know what you just did?" Within 30 minutes, the video had gone viral. Jake's footage, titled "Shocking, Man Attacks FBI Director's Father," accumulated views by the thousands, then tens of thousands. Elena's recording spread across social media with hashtags demanding justice. Robert's daughter, Jennifer Mitchell, was indeed the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. She'd followed her father into service, starting with the Naval Academy, then military intelligence, before rising through the FBI to become its first female director at 43. When federal agents arrived at Grace's diner, they found a community in shock. Derek Walsh sat in a corner booth, his earlier confidence completely evaporated, while Robert gave calm, precise statements to investigators. But as the FBI began examining the incident, they discovered something far more disturbing than a simple assault. The attack on Robert Mitchell was connected to a systematic campaign of intimidation targeting newcomers to Riverside. Property owners who refused to sell received threatening calls. Businesses faced sudden inspection problems. Families experienced harassment. All roads led back to Mayor Brennan and his development partners. Special Agent Lisa Chen, assigned to lead the investigation, reviewed surveillance footage from Grace's diner with her partner. "This wasn't random violence," she observed. "Walsh was agitated before he approached Mitchell. Look at how he keeps glancing at his phone, like he's receiving instructions or building courage." Within 48 hours, federal investigators had obtained phone records showing extensive communication between Derek Walsh and associates of Mayor Brennan. Text messages discussed handling the Mitchell problem and clearing obstacles to development. The assault had been orchestrated. Robert, meanwhile, maintained dignified silence through the media circus. He declined most interview requests, but agreed to speak with the regional news station. "This isn't about my daughter's position," he told the camera. "It's about how we treat each other as human beings, whether we judge people by their character or their circumstances." His grace under pressure made the story spread faster. By the third day, Riverside had become a national symbol of small-town corruption and the power of viral videos to trigger accountability. What Robert didn't initially know was that his assault had exposed only the surface of something much darker. Mayor Brennan's wife, Diana, had been secretly recording her husband's meetings for months. She'd watched him transform from a public servant into someone willing to destroy lives for profit. 3 nights after the assault, Diana appeared at Robert's door at 3 in the morning, tears streaming down her face. She handed him a USB drive containing recordings that documented the entire conspiracy. Meetings between Brennan and developer Victor Kane, discussions of intimidation tactics, evidence of payoffs to officials at county and state levels. "I worked for the CIA during the Cold War," Diana told Robert. "I recognize corruption when I see it. This needs to stop." Robert contacted Agent Chen immediately. The recordings proved that Riverside's harassment of newcomers wasn't bigotry or resistance to change. It was calculated business strategy, a scheme to acquire valuable properties by driving out owners through systematic intimidation. As federal investigators expanded their probe, they discovered that Riverside was merely one location in a network spanning 5 states. Rural towns facing economic hardship had become targets for sophisticated fraud operations disguised as development projects. The schemes served to launder money from unspecified criminal enterprises through seemingly legitimate real estate transactions. Mayor Brennan, realizing the scope of evidence against him, died by apparent suicide in his study. His death only accelerated the investigation. Within 2 weeks, federal prosecutors had arrested 47 people, including state legislators, regulatory officials, and business leaders across the region. Through it all, Derek Walsh sat in federal custody, struggling with the magnitude of his mistake. He'd assaulted a war hero on camera because someone told him it would help protect his town. In reality, he'd been a pawn in a criminal conspiracy that had nothing to do with Riverside's heritage and everything to do with profit. 6 weeks after the assault, Derek requested a meeting with Robert. Federal agents arranged the encounter at a secure location, both men sitting across a small table. "I wanted to apologize properly," Derek began, his voice rough. "Not through lawyers. Face to face." Robert listened silently. "I was wrong," Derek continued, "about everything. I let fear and manipulation turn me into someone who would hurt an innocent person. There's no excuse." "Many people were manipulated," Robert said quietly. "Corruption works by wrapping itself in noble purposes." "I'm testifying against everyone involved," Derek said. "Not for leniency, because it's right, and I'm refusing witness protection afterward, coming back to Riverside to face whatever comes next." Robert nodded slowly. "Redemption requires more than facing consequences. It demands active restoration." 3 months after the viral video thrust Riverside into national attention, the town held special elections. Elena Rodriguez, the waitress who'd recorded the assault, ran for mayor on a platform of transparency and inclusive governance. She won decisively. Her first official act was establishing a Citizens Oversight Committee with Robert Mitchell as its chair. The community held a reconciliation gathering in the Riverside Park. Residents shared food and conversation across divisions that had once seemed unbridgeable. Derek Walsh attended, announcing the creation of a community restoration fund, using his personal savings to repair homes of residents targeted during Brennan's administration. When Derek finished speaking, Robert stood and walked deliberately toward him. Every eye followed his movement. "Your commitment to restoration is noted and appreciated," Robert said simply. He extended his hand. Derek accepted the handshake, brief and formal, but symbolically powerful. Riverside was choosing reconciliation over retribution. As evening approached, Robert stood at the overlook where his property offered its most spectacular view of the river. The vista that developers had coveted, the land that had inadvertently placed him at the center of a conspiracy. Fire Chief Rodriguez joined him, standing in companionable silence before speaking. "Beautiful evening, sir?" "Indeed it is," Robert replied. "The veterans who organized protection details are transitioning to community service projects now, home repairs, youth mentoring." Robert nodded approvingly. "Good people finding new missions. And what about you? Found your new mission here in Riverside?" Robert considered the question seriously. "Perhaps I have. Not the mission I expected, but apparently the one I needed." In the growing twilight, Robert touched the American Legion pin on his cardigan. He'd sought quiet retirement in Riverside, but life had other plans. Sometimes the greatest battles required no weapons, only the courage to refuse intimidation, to stand firm against injustice, to believe that principles mattered more than convenience. As stars appeared above Riverside, Robert walked home at peace with the unexpected final mission that had found him. Not a warrior's mission this time, but a citizen's, equally vital to the nation he had served all his life. He climbed the steps to his porch and turned to look once more at the community lights reflecting on the river below. In the end, honor and justice had prevailed, as they must if America was to remain worthy of the sacrifices made to protect it.